My name is Patrick Mann. I'm the Director of Operations for WestGrid. And I think, as you all probably know, big things are happening with Compute Canada and with new systems, new hardware, and replacement of all the existing ones. So we're getting to the point where we really want to reach out and talk to all our users and start to bring them a bit more up to speed on exactly what the plans are. So it's a little premature right now in that we're still very much in planning stages and discussing stages and such. But here at WestGrid, we really thought it was a good idea, in fact a necessary thing, to get started. So in this talk, I'll tell you pretty much where we are now and give you some idea of what our thoughts and such are. But fundamentally, I want to aim at the new systems, the plans, and some of the schedule and what we're trying to get. So, in a bit of a nutshell here, we're going to have some problems for the next year as we go into this transition between the old and the new system. So, legacy systems, they're old. Talk about that a bit more. There's a lot of demand from the user community. It grows every year by significant amounts. But we're still waiting for the new systems. So we're going to have quite a complex transition and migration plan. And for the next year or so, we'll have a lot of capacity and availability issues between them. So I'll come back to this slide in the conclusions and tell you a little more then about where we're going. So let me dive in here and first off, very quickly, give you some idea of our funding, what's happened, and where the money's coming from and what we've got to spend, what are some basic plans. I'm not going to talk a lot about this because Compute Canada has already had a number of town halls and discussions and details. So I just want to set the stage here before talking a bit more about what's happening this year. So of course the original NPF National Platforms Fund was in 2006, which had about 150 million. And we ended up across Canada with about 200,000 cores and 20 petabytes of storage, spread across something like 27 or 28 sites. And when you think about it, that's sort of 9-10 years ago. That's a long time for keeping that hardware going. So last year, CFI announced a cyber infrastructure program, and we were invited to apply. Compute Canada did so. And did, I think, a pretty brilliant job of trying to figure out what we needed, where we were going, all those kinds of things. And we were awarded 30 million. If you count the matching funds, that's that total project cost column, 75 million, that we've actually got to spend right now. And the plan in the end was about 126,000 cores and about 62 petabytes. So storage was clearly something that we were really interested in, or that we found we have all sorts of users really using up storage. So we needed more on that line. Cores, well, at least with modern cores, which are considerably faster than they were 10 years ago, it's kind of replacement. There are two more CFI programs coming up this year. Challenge 2, Stage 2, 20 million. And in 2018, we're hoping for 50 million. So that would be increasing amounts that would give a general net boost whole infrastructure. So there's essentially what we're working with this year, next few years. The plan then for those awards and such, there was a lot of community consultation. The Spark planning, Spark 1, Spark 2, where white papers were asked for. Dugan O'Neill, the CSO, went around the country a few times, making presentations, talking to researchers, and we, of course, looked at all the historical usage patterns, all that kind of thing, and came up with the plan for spending that money that we've got. We actually provided it to to CFI during the proposal stages. So in a real nutshell, down the bottom there, there are really two things that came up really strongly. One was that it was clear we would no longer be, or Compute Canada would no longer be just a job-based submit jobs to a cluster. But we were expanding into things like cloud, research data management, RDM, object storage, and along the way, as I'm sure a number of you know, we introduced the Research Platforms and Portals program, RPP, which essentially looked at longer-term, multi-year projects, and things like platforms as service, software as a service, portals, research portals. So there was a lot there. So it's clear that we're going to expand services quite a lot more than we have before. And of course, there's a whole bunch of related things: a single sign-on across Canada, kind of backup services. If we get into cloud and platforms, then we need to have reliable services, job-based, or here and there. And then the second thing is consolidation. Instead of the rather large number of data centers and systems that we do have, currently have, the idea was to go to a few big systems. That has a lot of advantages. It's much easier to work with a few big national systems, a whole bunch of smaller systems, none of which are nowadays quite big enough to satisfy some of the usage patterns. So at this point, nowadays, we can't really give anybody a 50,000 core job, for instance. So very quickly then, right now we've got 50 systems above 27 data centers, 200,000 cores, maybe a couple of petaflops in total. And we've got this superb staff, about 200 experts. The approach is that by 2018, we should get that down to 5, maybe 10 data centers, something like that. It'll probably be up in the middle. A significant chunk of cores, 300,000 cores, 12 petaflops, 50 plus petabytes, and we'll support that with the existing staff generally. In Canada, I think we're very successful in working with both CFI and the federal government to really put forward these ideas. There's a continual pressure on the federal government to start thinking about these kinds of big HPC resources, RC resources, computing resources, to be actually just part of infrastructure within Canada. We don't get into this 10 years or 5 or 9 years between refresh cycles. It starts to become a continuous cycle. And I think that's met with some welcome. So we'll see where that goes. I really hope that works through. So into a bit of the nitty-gritty here then. So we've got initially 4 consolidated sites. So we said we're aiming for a few more, 5 to 10 or something, and last year was a big competitive RFP to essentially institutions, asking them if they would like to host a site. And through, a complete review process, 4 were identified: Victoria, SFU, Waterloo, and Toronto. The same process is in its second stage right now as we speak to identify 1 or 2 more sites that may be in the list. But fundamentally, for that initial tranche of funding, we've got 4 sites as such. And the plan is GP1 in Victoria. That's a cloud system. As you may know, we've got East and West Cloud existing right now. So initially, at least, this would be an addition to that cloud. At SFU, GP2, a general purpose system, lots of compute, GPU nodes, probably reasonably fast, interconnects, something like InfiniBand, and also some long-term file storage and such. And that would be duplicated at Waterloo. So two pretty much equivalent systems at SFU and Waterloo, both big single systems, and we would expect those two to take the majority of the existing legacy load. And then a very large parallel dedicated system, LP1, large parallel 1, which will be in Toronto, although I'll note that the plans are that we've got a year to go for that, because the review committees, the technical review committees, noted that new processors are coming from Intel. It would be a really good idea they were doing. So the initial stuff is all around GP1, GP2, and GP3. The one that's not on the previous slide was more or less aimed at the compute end of things, is storage. The Compute Canada is trying to build the NSI, the National Storage Infrastructure. So just to note, in all those Spark talks and community talks and input, it was clear that we are moving into a more storage-heavy operation architecture because of input from all these big experiments. We've got astronomers, genomics. A lot of people are taking a lot of data and petabytes of data and need it as a reliable, accessible storage place to put it. It's experimental data. It's essentially irreplaceable. Some of it may not be particularly private. Some of it is, some of the health stuff. But it certainly is irreplaceable. You don't want to run these experiments multiple times. Clearly what should be shared infrastructure. So the idea is to develop this national storage infrastructure, and part of it's just the development of what we've already got, but now to think about it as a separate, but at least a focus of Compute Canada. At the moment, there are three components to the national storage infrastructure. Long-term file storage at SFU and Waterloo, something on the order of 15 petabytes. SFU will probably do that first. I'll talk schedules in a couple of slides. Both of that will have tape backup, redundant tape backup, maybe across the sites, so some capability of geo-replication between Waterloo and SFU. Right now, you might know that at WestGrid we have Silo, that's in Saskatoon, and this essentially would be a Silo replacement for files for long-term storage. A new service for Compute Canada would be an object store. So that's something similar to what Amazon Web Services supply, the simple storage service S3, and folks like Microsoft, Google, IBM, they all offer these object stores. The object stores, a great advantage, modern object stores, is that they distribute really well across multiple sites. That's really what they're designed for. And they can be accessed from all sites. So they give really very impressive ways of taking something like experimental data, storing it in a way that's online and accessible, maybe not very high speed, but quite reasonable, and do it redundantly. So if you think of things like YouTube or whatever, that's an object store. All their movies are sitting in an object store, distributed all over. This is completely new to us. We haven't done this, but we've certainly got a number of those RPPs and user groups who are taking experimental observational data, and an object store is absolutely the right place to put it. So we're going to build one. Hopefully we'll start small to see really what the interest is, because this will be new to our users. But if all goes well, that will grow. The third one is the decache from the Large Hadron Collider guys, the LHC guys. This has become a pretty standard, and we have some of the large experiments like Atlas, Snowplus, etc., who are all using decache. And the plan there is to have a large decache system at SFU for all those guys to store their data. And of course, each of the clusters will have their own local direct attached scratch spaces and such, very high speed storage. But this is it's kind of on the side storage infrastructure. So I think we've covered pretty much all the basics with this one. Right, so where are we right now? So this is the part where it gets a bit vaguer, where I think we felt that it was a really good idea to bring our users up to date as much as we can to where we are. So the systems, GP1, GP2, GP3, the national storage infrastructure, and then LP1. So GP1, remember that's the UVic cloud, the cloud in Victoria. The RFP process is complete. Vendors have been chosen, and negotiation with the vendors has taken place. And if all goes well, orders and announcements should go out next week. So that was, in some sense, the easiest one, because we already had a cloud, and the cloud was only put in a year and a half ago. So it was already up to date, and we had lots of experience with what was out there and what to use. So the UVic guys did a brilliant job and got the RFP out very early in the process. So the in-production estimate at the moment is that it's August 30th. And again, that's pretty aggressive, but but probably reasonable, just because we're very familiar with that. It's relatively straightforward to buy a whole bunch of hardware nodes and just add it to the existing cloud. Now, GP2 and GP3, they're a bit different. I've got a note there with GP2 that there's really an intense design process. And that gets into, so do you want a node which has 4 gigabytes per core or 8 gigabytes per core? How many users do we have who have very, very large memory footprints? How many GPUs should we have? We've seen a tremendous increase in GPU usage over the years. So we need lots of GPUs, but how many GPUs? And of course, if you buy a really memory-heavy fat node, that's really very expensive. So we have to try to mix and match as best as we can. And this, while we have a lot of information from our users, in the end, there's a lot of discussion going on. So the RFP has been in design for essentially 6 months, and that's being led by the SFU team. And it should go out next week. And we seem to think that that's reasonable, that we've got the RFP itself in shape. So an in-production estimate, everybody's been aiming for October of this year. I'm not totally convinced. I think that would be, say, a little optimistic. But something like that, assuming the RFP process goes through reasonably straightforwardly. Of course, a lot of discussion with the research groups, with the researchers, and I think this is pretty well defined right now. So I'm hoping for a pretty straightforward approach to getting GP2. And remember, GP2 is really the key here, because what I haven't got to yet is that when our old legacy systems are going to be decommissioned, and that's getting into this time next year, or a bit earlier. So we need to get GP2 up pretty quick so that we can start getting users on it and they can start learning about it, we get the software stacks right, all that kind of thing. So pushing hard on GP2. I should note that part of GP2 and GP3, in fact the whole works, is that there are significant data center updates and improvements that are involved in it. And I understand that SFU is already adding some big water cooled chiller or water chiller systems and getting all that organized. So there's quite a lot here beyond just buying the equipment. You also have to set up the data centers. GP3, that RFP is again in process. It'll be almost identical to GP2's, but they've still got some data center work and such to do. So kind of thinking that January we will be in production. So that will be great. Remember the GP1, GP2, GP3, that essentially replaces the kind of capacity we've got plus a bit more in the way of cores and compute. Then there's the National Storage Infrastructure, NSI. The process is pretty much complete. The vendors have been chosen. Again, quite a lot of discussion with them, especially about things like object storage and how you do that. We're currently waiting for master agreements to be signed with the vendors, since these go to eventually all 4 sites, and we're going to buy off those master agreements with the sites. We have to make sure that all works well, so that's in with the purchasing departments and some negotiations still going on. Again, kind of hoping for next week, maybe the week after. Hard to predict when these kinds of signatures get formalized. So all goes well, mid-September 2016. I've got a lot more to say about that shortly. LP1, remember that's where the whole thing got delayed because one thought that this was really additional stuff. It'll be really nice to have it, but we're looking forward to new announcements from Intel before we get into that. So that one is just in the thinking stage. So at that point, we know we're getting GP1, GP2, GP3, the National Storage Infrastructure, and LP1, so we know what we're getting. Now we look at cluster decommissioning. And remember, a lot of these systems are 8, 9 years old. Our biggest issue with these systems is generally that they're not supported anymore. Especially things like storage. We've been talking to the vendors. We have negotiated, sometimes relatively expensive, support packages over the years to try to keep the systems going. But we're really reaching the end of these guys. So there are our WestGrid systems. I'll concentrate on WestGrid at this point. So in Calgary, Breezy and Lattice are scheduled for decommissioning at the end of this year. Vancouver, Orsinus, March 31st. Victoria, Hermes and Nestor, March 31st. Edmonton, Hunger and Jasper for December 31st of this year. The parallel cluster at Calgary, which is more modern, is supposed to go for all next year. The Winnipeg cluster, Rex, that's scheduled for March 31st, 2018. So that's supposed to keep going for a bit. But we do, in fact, have a storage issue there in that their storage controlling, their storage system, their local storage system, goes off support. And the vendor said they won't be able to support it beyond that. They just don't have spare parts left. So that one's a little bit iffy. And then Bugaboo in Vancouver will indeed keep going until 2018. So remember that we're sort of thinking we get GP2 in October, GP3 in January, and essentially at the same time we've got machines being decommissioned, and we'll have to get users onto these new machines, therefore in quite a short period. Storage then, remember we got the NSI, and we're hoping to get the NSI, the initial file storage stuff going in September of this year. Here's some ideas of where it's going. All I'm going to do in this slide is concentrate on 2 of them, Silo in Saskatoon and Bugaboo in SFU. Those are the long-term storage systems that WestGrid currently provides. Everything else is local, essentially scratch space, your home directories, that kind of thing, on the individual clusters. So not as critical as some of the long-term, more permanent storage. Silo is old, and it has those same problems with the storage systems that the vendors have. Well, the vendor has told us that they really cannot provide support for Silo beyond the end of this year. So we have rather a hard date for Silo, December 31st, and Silo is full. We've got about 3 petabytes of used active storage sitting on Silo that essentially has to come off Silo by the end of the year. So Vancouver, SFU, Bugaboo, yeah, there's a lot of long-term storage there. I put that in lighter red to note that we've got a bit more leeway there as it's going to keep going next year. So clearly from this slide, we've got to concentrate on silo. And that's our initial urgent problem. So silo is decommissioned December 31st, pretty hard date. We're hoping to get NSI going in mid-September. Our initial transfer estimates of how fast we could get data off silo, the limit is actually how fast the controllers can provide data from the silo disks, is 4 to 5 months. That's longer than October to December. So there, in a nutshell, is our serious panic. The second point underneath it, where it says major users, is our ace in the hole at the moment. We have users who are on silo currently, who use silo essentially as backup storage. Therefore, the master copies are somewhere else, and we are hoping we can transfer the data from those master copies rather than from silo. And I put one example up there, the astronomers, the Canadian Federation of Astronomical Research, CANFAR. They have copies of UVic and, in fact, master copies in their own systems. It was about 800 terabytes, so significant use. So that, we're hoping, is something we don't have to transfer. So we are working with these major users. I'll just go down that list. Testing, of course, we are doing a lot of data migration tests. That's the silo team are deeply involved with this. How fast can they get data off silo? What are the most optimal methods of doing so? Can they move it to Waterloo or to SFU if there's storage available? So they're looking at best practices. Scheduling and documentation. Let's go to documentation best practice. So that'll come out of a lot of this testing. We're expecting to provide over the summer quite a lot of documentation about how one would start to move data from silo and get it over. We're going to have a big scheduling problem. We can't afford to let everybody wait until the last week because it's just not fast enough. So we're going to, I won't say, the preliminary tentative plans at the moment that we'll talk to users. We'll have time windows for users to copy data over. Quite limited time. We'll kind of give everybody a week here and there to get their data copied over. There will be both self-serve and maybe system-defined operations. So that's keep an eye on things, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can when we've got these kinds of schedules organized. But we're working hard on that kind of thing. A couple of smaller minor points maybe at the bottom. Network capability. We're also in contact with Canary and the RANs, VCNet, Cybera, SRNet, MRNet, and making sure that we don't do any extra work between now and say this time next year. No upgrades, nothing like that. We want the networks to go really well, and if possible, we also want to put in some separate connections for the interim period. Similarly with system maintenance, we're not going to do too much to the existing systems. Can't really afford to have a system go down because of a big storage issue for a week or two. So just talked about storage. Compute is not so desperate, but we still have to work on it. This is about the existing rack allocations. So that is this year's allocations on the systems. And I just want to make a couple of points here. The basic point is that we're already swamped. That we usually try to keep about 80%, allocate about 80%, keep 20% for default users. This year, many of our systems were allocated well above the 80%. I've been on the RAC committee, and last year was really quite tense, trying to balance and work with all the users to satisfy as many as we could. I think, as you probably all know, essentially, even science ratings from the review that were really in the good category just didn't get any allocation. It was really hard to work through all those proposals. And right now, I think it's pretty universal that we are seeing lots of long queue times. People are complaining about their jobs. I think that's the last couple of months now. That's been really the major issue on our ticketing system is people just calling up and saying, hey, job didn't run for 2 weeks. We're even getting internal guys saying the jobs can't run, even though it's not small ones. We're also, for instance, seeing users moving between systems, trying to figure out which one has the best response for their use. That's fine. We know we're trying to make the most efficient use of the whole thing. I just have some notes about 2016 RAC. There's 366 applications. There were 16% increase in CPU, 34% increase in storage. There's that big GPU ask, over 120% from the GPU. And the average award was only 50%, 57% of what people asked for. So there's that continuing, really strong demand for the kind of resources that Compute Canada has, and in particular, what we've got at WestGrid. So what have we got? What? Not much. None, really. Compute, not much to go there. Storage. Yeah, storage Silo especially has reached the peak. We're seeing performance hits on Silo just because there isn't any room for anything else to happen on it. I think users have almost certainly noticed that the guys at Silo have been sending messages out saying they're moving data to tape as much as they can, asking users if they can get rid of stuff, get rid of old things. And really working hard to free up as much space as possible. And I have to say we're very thankful to the majority of users who have responded very well to all these requests for figuring out what to do. So we've had a lot of work with the users, and really the response has been great. So we're still alive. We haven't actually beat up against the top, but the data just keeps coming in. And a particularly difficult one is that I don't think we've got enough headroom for the incoming experimental and observational data, at least to the end of the year. So we're going to have to start moving some of those guys with big users over onto new systems just as soon as possible. And then RAC 2017, so next year's RAC. Okay, we're going to have a mix of systems, some systems going and getting decommissioned, and that's going to be another pain to try to get RAC 2017 organized. We'll do our best. I think you can. There are some intense discussions about changing some of the processes that we're going to go through. Compute Canada will be announcing a lot of these later on in the summer. The approach is still that the RPPs, the initial letters of intent, should be asked. Should be the end of August sometime. So expect the same kinds of initial stuff end of August, September, October for writing RAC proposals. But it's going to be difficult. So essentially, a final slide then that we've got a major effort over the next year. All staff are going to be really stretched, trying to handle new systems, trying to work with users to move data and compute over, trying to figure out what they have to do to codes and jobs to work on the new systems. So in three parts there: compute. Yeah, we're certainly doing our best to optimize scheduling. We do respond to urgent user requests, but there's really nothing left to play with. So we'll do our best to juggle as much as we can, but it's not going to be nice. Storage. Essentially, at this point, we are turning down requests for additional storage. There really isn't any additional storage available between now and next year. Support, same kind of issues. The systems teams are trying to work with the new gear as well as keeping some of this old stuff going, just looping along, lots of duct tape. So things like new software installs, big updates, a lot of that isn't going to happen. And essentially, we can't afford to try them either. We don't want to change anything because we really can't afford to have systems go down just in the middle of transfers and such. We're so tight on some of the timelines. So that's going to have pretty low priority for software and things, and I'm sure that users will see a slower response, and not only from the job queues, but also from staff. again, trying to cope with that. So there's my, my sort of big slide. Bear with us. We'll do the best we can, and trying to work with some of these very, very tight timelines that have really, I mean, they've come from the funding. We've been driving forward as quickly as possible as soon as we've received funding, as soon as we've received notification. And I say a lot of the stuff has kind of happened, but it was hard to get started before we knew what we were getting. And one final thing, there is a Compute Canada Town Hall at HPCS, performance computing seminars in 2 weeks' time in Edmonton. So Compute Canada will probably go over a lot of this stuff from a Compute Canada perspective in that town hall, so feel free to join in. And of course, hopefully we'll see quite a few of you at HPCS, and you're welcome to buttonhole me, and we'll try to bring everybody, we'll try to keep talking to everybody about our plans as they become more and more concrete. I think you can expect to hear quite a lot from us, probably by close to in August as we get the schedules and the details of what we've actually ordered and what we've actually got to work. So at that point, I'm going to finish up and see if there are any questions. Sounds good. You're certainly welcome to contact me or any of the site leads or staff around. Support at WestGrid.ca. We'll do, or info at WestGrid.ca. And my email address and contact info is on the WestGrid website. Say, feel free to ask questions. And if you've got any comments, especially about details of what you might need, or what kind of approach you need for software stacks, for instance, all that going on at the same time, what software to install, that stuff we'd love to hear about, and I can certainly pass along to the national teams who are working on stuff.
Hi, Patrick. This is I have a question that's come in over email.
Okay.
It's a bit of a technical one, but perhaps a comment on it. We have a question from the University of Saskatchewan asking about study incompatibility on silo and I don't know if there's anything that maybe one of the local site leads could say about that. The issue is forwarded to the support email.
Right. I think that does require a detailed answer. So what I'm just going to do is say, yeah, that the support, one of the analysts can respond to that one. There needs to be some analysis to see what he's doing. Yeah, I don't think I can answer a question like that unless I work with you. Yeah. Okay. We're good. Yeah. Thanks everyone then. Jana, any last minute? Good.